Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Danielle LoDuca, the host of the Thriving Muslim Woman podcast, and I'm pleased to be here with you again today. SubhanAllah, I got some news from my doctors this week, and the scans that we got back were not what we had hoped for, not what I had hoped for. The cancer is more dire than we thought, and the treatment options are not what we were planning for, what we were expecting in the first days of this. Throughout this year, there's always been a relatively high possibility of cure, and the information on these latest scans, that may not be the case anymore. So I'm bringing this up not to get your sympathy, but it's this is life, right? And when the horizon of our life narrows, what happens is that a lot of the noise disappears. So in this kind of situation, you don't really think about a lot of the things that are typically on your mind, your bank account, your chores, what somebody said, what you're going to eat for lunch tomorrow. The things just look really differently. The world looks different. And, first and foremost, I think about the purpose of life. I think about, where am I headed, right? What is this life? What is this world all about? And in order to stay on track, right, to be able to kind of continue to see the truth, because what in my experience, right, I'm a convert to Islam. I accepted Islam about more than 23 years ago, alhamdulillah. And so, it's one thing to know what the truth is and what reality is. So we know as Muslims, why we are here on earth. We know who created us, the most merciful. We know where we're headed, back to Him, right? To the day of judgment, to the afterlife. We know what is going on here. We know what's been said about this world, that it's, we should be in this world like a traveler, that this is just a short stop in our existence. But it's very easy to lose track of all of that in our lives, isn't it? We get distracted by work, we get distracted by family. And sometimes you can really get so clouded that you lose sight altogether of what you're supposed to be doing in this world. And so instances like the one I'm in, where, health is maybe not going to be what it was, right? It's something that we're supposed to take advantage of while we have it. But when you find, okay, this may not be lasting much longer, it really puts things in perspectives and causes you to think about things in a different way with greater clarity. But one of the main things that I've seen across the board that affects us, that makes it harder for us to stay on track, harder for us to focus, harder for us to do our best, it seems to be relationships. So when I see people struggling, whatever they're struggling with, whether it's their spirituality, whether it's their business, whether it's their family, I find that it's usually a relationship, usually a specific relationship, maybe a couple of relationships, but usually there's one specific relationship that is front and center, creating a lot of tension, creating a lot of distraction, causing a lot of turmoil. And so the people in our lives, they matter so much. We've been created in a way where we need community, we need relationship, we need family. And those relationships create the environment of our lives, and whether or not we feel like we live in a sanctuary or something more close to a cage. In my own life and in my years of coaching, the number one thing that holds women back spiritually, physically, emotionally, it is the unresolved relationship. It's that heavy air that is hanging over you in your living room. And today I'm telling you, and this is why I bring up my story, is because you do not have the luxury of waiting. Don't wait to change. Don't wait to make a change in your world, in your relationships. So just this week, alhamdulillah, I've mentioned it before, we have the Uplift program coming up, which is all about building joyful relationships. Last week, I had the opportunity to make a pitch to a giving circle that offers grants for nonprofits. And we want to be able to provide this program to more women so that people can really begin designing and creating their relationships, their lives, so that they can thrive, so that our community can thrive. And when I was giving that pitch and answering questions afterwards, a woman asked, like, what about Arab men? Right? For her, coming from an Arab background, she was listening to my pitch, thinking, well, this would never work. I don't know about it in her specific situation, but she's saying this would never work, like within the Arab culture with Arab men. So she was thinking about like fixing relationships, like marriages maybe, or whatever. She thought Arab men, because of their culture, will not be receiving this kind of change very well. And she thought that they wouldn't change. And that, in the moment, I answered her by explaining the program. But really, I feel like this is a really dangerous myth that keeps us in sort of like a prison of victimhood, when we think that we have no power, we have no influence in our lives, in our relationships, that other people around us are just going to stay the way they are. They'll never change. And so I might as well do nothing. And it assumes that our joy, our happiness, our vitality is just a gift that someone else has to grant us. Not that it's something that we can actually produce, that we have agency over. But there is an amazing stat that I want to share with you, the 80% rule. Systemic psychology and the Gottman Institute show that in a two-person system, a relationship between two people, if one person consistently changes their communication, specifically the way that they start up communication and the way that they respond, their patterns, the other person in that relationship, their behavior improves. In 80% of cases, that's the case. By one person changing the way that they communicate, the way that they show up, it will change how the other person behaves. And I have seen this. I've witnessed it. I've seen it in my own life. I witness it with the women that I work with. It is 100% true, right? And we're not talking 50% or 10% or 20%, 80%. So you create your environment. And I love the idea of the woman in the family being like a thermostat. And really this goes for any person, right? So in any individual, whether it's the man or the woman, has this ability to make a difference in other people as well, right? By thinking of themselves more as a thermostat where, you're not, you have control, you have power over the environment that you live in, the experience inside your relationships. So I think about this as, I wish I had said this in that moment, is just, who do you think raised those men that you're talking about? Who influenced them? Who had some sort of power over the way that they were developed and raised in the first place, right? For the majority of a child's life, they're spending time with their mother. And they're being influenced by her and the way that she shows up. And then they're seeing how she interacts with their father, right? And interacts with other people. And that has a huge impact. So we complain about difficult men. And I see this a lot as well, like complaining about the man. But women have incredible influence over how men are developed in the first place as children. And then we also have a ton of influence, which is often overlooked and ignored by us in our relationships with men. And of course, this isn't the case only in relationships with men, but I did want to draw this out because when people want to change the environment in their homes with their husbands, they feel powerless oftentimes, but they are not powerless. You are not powerless. And if you take that attitude, what are you doing? You're just perpetuating more of the same unhealthy patterns that you're complaining about in the first place. So I believe that we are the ones who curate the emotional intelligence of the home. And if you want a different world for your daughters and for your sons, you have to change the way that you show up. And why not do it now, right? What are we waiting for? So when you live in tension, your heart rate is constantly elevated. This is maybe going to blow your mind, because it really blew my mind when I learned about this a while back, that, you know, the way that we feel, the way that we think has a physical impact. So the heart rate elevating, and there's something called diffuse physiological arousal, DPA. And this is when you're flooded. Your prefrontal cortex actually shuts down. So when you're flooded with emotions, let's say you experience a stressful interaction with a spouse, a parent, a sibling, a child, your prefrontal cortex will not function. That's the, decision-making center of the brain. It cannot function at its best. You can lose your empathy, your creativity, your ability to connect with Allah when you have this physiological flooding. Chronic relationship stress is actually a biological toxin. So in these days, we're thinking about glyphosate on our food, eating organic, air filters in our home, water filters, all this stuff. But we're ignoring the fact that stress is also a toxin. And chronic relationship stress can cause systemic inflammation, which suppresses the immune system. And we're here thinking that we're sacrificing for our families by staying in that tension. But in reality, we're actually destroying the vessel, which is our bodies, that is meant to serve those people that we love, that we think we're showing up for, by sacrificing ourselves. So we've got it all wrong. We've really got it backwards. We have to be caring for, nurturing the body that we have been given, that we're living in and existing in, and demonstrating healthy behaviors as well for all of the people around us, right? So let's just put this to rest and stop. Like sometimes, we need to go through a lot of effort and work to fix ourselves and change. But around this, I really just want to say, just stop. Stop being a victim. Stop being a martyr. You're not helping anyone. You're not helping yourself. You're not helping the people that you love, that you claim to be showing up for. And this is proof of that, right? This stress that you're sitting in, the tension you're sitting in, is actually hurting you and harming your body. Studies show that women who are in high conflict relationships, they have a 40% slower wound healing rate, and they have higher markers of heart disease. So your relationship is not just a topic. It is a vital aspect of your well-being on many levels. So communication is a huge piece of how we relate to other people, right? And often the issues that we have in our relationships stem from a lack of communication or communication that's ineffective. So I want to give you some concepts today that you can use to improve your communication in your relationships. And alhamdulillah, these are coming from the Quran as well. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most high, the most merciful, the most generous, He didn't leave us to guess about how to communicate. He gave us examples in the Quran. And there are actually 6 amazing styles that we can look at, which we're going to go over in the Uplift program, inshallah. But today I'm going to give you 3. All right, so one of them, which is a really beautiful one, very important, and it's so critical when it comes to our relationships, and it's the concept of gentleness, gentle speech. Okay, so in this program, I'm calling it the soft startup, starting a conversation with gentleness. So let's say you have something really heavy to talk about, or some, quote unquote bomb to drop. Like you need to talk about something, something really heavy weighing on you, and you've got to bring it up, and you don't know how. Right? We often worry about what words we're going to use. And sometimes we neglect the tone, right? And the energy with which we express that issue to the other person. So the soft startup solves that problem. And this concept of gentle speech can be used, right? So instead of worrying about like what word choice and all this stuff, how can you bring gentleness to that conversation? How can you start up the conversation softly? Even to Pharaoh, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Musa to be gentle, to use gentle speech with him. Okay, so here we're talking about a tyrant, right? Someone who's like patently evil, who is murdering, children, who called himself God. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Moses, to speak to him with gentle speech. So if that's the case with someone evil who is an enemy, then how is it that we are not using gentle speech with our loved ones inside our homes, with our children, with our family members, with our parents? Why? Gentleness helps to keep the other person's heart open, right? And that was the rationale in the Quran when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Moses to speak to Pharaoh in this way. Perhaps he will listen, right? So if you want the other person's heart to be open, gentle speech is a must, okay? Because when you come with an attack with harsh speech, which is the opposite of gentle speech, what happens? The other person will immediately put up walls. They'll put up defenses. They go into defense mode because it feels like an attack. So gentle speech is incredibly powerful. It's something that you can plan for. So you have a conversation coming up, something that you need to bring up. Be sure that you prepare yourself mentally and emotionally to begin that conversation with gentle speech. And notice how the other person's heart remains open to you and they're not ready to kind of fight and attack and, defend themselves. It will make a huge difference, inshallah. The next one is straightforward speech. قولا سديدا. No more hints. No more passive aggression. Just be clear. Honest truth. Okay, this is what stops the energy leaks. Okay, so imagine like you're making hints. What happens in that type of conversation, right? You're dropping hints and the other person's not getting it. And then what happens? You get frustrated. Your mind spirals out of control thinking about how could they not notice this? And, no benefit there. Passive aggression. You just want them to know you're angry and upset, but you won't talk about it, right? Just be clear. Just be honest. Just be straightforward. This is a really simple one. And it's like almost so simple that we don't implement it enough. So don't forget about this one. And the third one, I'm going to go into a little bit more depth on this one because this is قولا بليغا, effective speech. And this is the word when you hear like about the language of the Quran and balagha, the eloquence of the Quran. This is where that word is coming from. So this is really deep, okay? These are words that reach like the inner part of a human being. And this can be used when we repair a rupture. So let's say you had an argument, you had some sort of misunderstanding or whatever, you have a rupture in a relationship and you want to repair it. This is the type of speech that you use. So like I said, it comes from the root word balagha, which is when we're talking about the eloquence of the Quran, we use that word. But it literally means to reach, to attain, to arrive at a destination. And in the context of communication, it can refer to speech that is eloquent, profound, profoundly effective because it reaches its intended target, the heart and soul of the listener, mashallah. Isn't that amazing? So, for example, in the Quran, in Surah Nisa, Allah uses that word. So it's Surah 4, Ayah 63. And speak to them with an effective word reaching their inner selves. So a word that reaches its destination. And in our case of, receiving the Quran, that's our heart and soul. And it's the same when we're talking to our loved ones. We want to reach their heart and soul. So especially if you have to repair, this is the type of speech you want to use. So you know what the target is. The target is that person's heart. The target is repair, right? So you want to use words and language and speech and tone of voice that will reach that target. So this type of speech implies reaching the utmost point. And for it to be baligha, it has to be so perfectly tailored to the listener's psychological state so that it lands exactly where it needs to be. It bypasses defenses and it can reach the inner self of that person. It's highly meaningful, deep, personalized communication. And it's not just about the words, what's being said, but it's how it's crafted to resonate with the specific person that you're speaking to. So I'm like getting chills talking about this because this is how Allah has spoken to us as human beings, like in His Quran, right? How amazing and beautiful is that? And I feel like as a act of gratitude, right, we should remember that this is how Allah has spoken to us. And then if we can turn around now and use it to His creation, these other people that are in our lives in a similar way, trying to, bypass their defenses and speak to them in that incredibly deep and meaningful way. How powerful is that, right? And like I said, this is especially important when you're going to be creating, conversation around repair. And when you think about, in the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his life, and you think about his wife, Khadija, this example I've given several times in this podcast, but, when he was in his most vulnerable moments, she didn't criticize, right? There was no harshness there. And she provided tranquility for him. And that's what we're seeking in our relationships. And that's what Allah has described our relationships with, tranquility. So we want to create that. We want to produce that. We want to be able to experience that. And it doesn't come from harshness and attacking. And we can see that in that example between Khadija, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Prophet. And that is what enabled us to be able to receive that first revelation, right? She was there supporting him. She was like the architecture that held that first revelation. Just highlights how important this, the way that we speak and the way that we treat each other is. So I would like for you to pick one relationship in your life that's leaking your energy. So you might not have to think about it too much. It might pop right into your mind. But if you need a moment, take a moment and think about what is the relationship in my life that really drains my energy the most. So don't think of all the relationships in your life that are difficult. Just think of the one, right? The one that if you were to change that relationship, if you could just shift that one relationship, it would make a huge difference in your life. I once had a client who was working on transitioning her business into and scaling her business. And even though she came to me to work on that, right, the issue that kept coming up again and again was her mother. Every single conversation, it would end up going back to her mother and that relationship. And when we focused on that relationship and we shifted that relationship, it freed her up from all of the issues that seemed to be the reasons she was struggling to scale her business. So sometimes we think these things are unrelated, but they're not unrelated. And one of the reasons is because that relationship is draining so much of your energy, right? So imagine if you could clear up that one relationship and all of the things that would change in your life as a result. That's the relationship I want you to think about, okay? So now, the challenge is stop waiting for them to change. Stop waiting for them to apologize. Today, you're going to use one of those three types of speech that I mentioned. Gentle speech, straightforward speech, or that qawlan baligha, effective speech. And you can do this in several ways. So maybe you have a need that you actually need to state, right? Maybe you've been being passive aggressive because there's a need of yours that's not being met and you're not sure how to communicate it. What if you were to use gentle speech and straightforward speech combined and just be very clear about, the facts, like this is what's been going on, and your feelings, this is what I'm feeling, and your desire, your want, or your need, this is what I would like. And just communicate that clearly to that person and see what happens. You can set a boundary that protects your energy, right? Maybe something has been going on that is really draining you, and it's someone else in your life overstepping a boundary, maybe that you haven't set clearly, you haven't established, right? And a boundary, by the way, is something that you do, not something that someone else does. It's not about controlling someone else when you set a boundary. It's about choosing how you're going to operate. So you might say, if you are going to scream at me or throw things when we're having an argument or we're talking about something, I am going to leave the room, for 20 minutes until I calm down, until we both calm down. And then we can see about resuming the conversation, right? So you're not telling the other person, don't yell at me, don't scream at me, don't do this, don't do that, and trying to control them. You're saying, if this happens, I'm choosing not to be in that environment. And I know that I'm going to also get upset and I won't show up as my best self. So I'm going to remove myself from the situation. I'm telling you in advance that if this happens, I'm going to leave the room and I'm going to take 20 minutes and I'm going to calm down. And then I'm going to see if we are ready to resume that conversation maybe in a different way, right? That's how you set a boundary. It's not telling the other person what to do. It's about telling the other person what you will or will not do. And then it's releasing yourself as well from the reaction, right? So it's not you're going to have a boundary depending on how the other person feels. That is your boundary, right? So you have to kind of set it in stone. And that's one of the reasons we get so frustrated, so upset, so angry, is because we say we have these boundaries or we think we have these boundaries, but we actually don't. We've never communicated them clearly. We've never actually decided what we will or will not do. And we're too busy thinking about what the other person should or should not do. And that is, it's a big source of that drain of energy, of anger, of resent. And like we said before, remember, resent is going to create a really negative effect in your body. So we have to protect ourselves from that. And then we do need to repair as well. So like maybe you had a situation with that person that you called to mind, and some repair is necessary. This is something that I am very deliberate about doing with my children. So if something happened and, maybe I lost my temper, or I got irritated by something someone did, or someone did something they didn't do, maybe I reacted or responded in a way that is not the way that I want to show up as a parent. And then I realize that. I usually realize it pretty quick. And then I think about it a little bit. I calm myself down. And then I will go back to the kid and say, look, this is what happened. And I felt like this. Maybe I got frustrated or whatever it was. And, I really should not have raised my voice, or I shouldn't have said X, Y, Z. And that's not how I want to show up as your parent. And you didn't deserve that, right? That wasn't warranted. And then you begin that conversation in the proper way, right? With the right tone, with the right words. And it is amazing how much that type of repair opens up connection. Because imagine if you blow up at somebody, or you say something that you wish you wouldn't have said, and then you never say anything about it. You never go back and repair. Relationships are really built in this moment of repair, because you will not be perfect, and you will not be, calm and collected and use the right words and use the right tone 100% of the time, right? We're going to work towards that, but it's not going to happen 100% of the time, because one day maybe you didn't get enough sleep, or your hormones are out of whack, or you're hungry, or who knows what, right? So many things can cause us to kind of go off track. But what happens when you go off track is what really matters. What do you do next? And repair is the most powerful thing to help strengthen relationships. And I feel like this is the area where, the work really happens, and that connection is really created. So if you don't do these things today, if you don't start this now, when are you going to do it? Right? So that relationship that you called to mind, that is the one that's kind of, I don't want to say in the way, but it's creating that drain of energy, and it's blocking you from so much possibility for yourself and within that relationship. And who knows how it's affecting the other person, right? So what are we waiting for? Are you waiting for another scan? Are you waiting for a diagnosis? Are you waiting for, an accident? What are you waiting for? SubhanAllah, we don't know what our life holds. We don't know if we have another day to live. So why do we put these things off? And usually it goes back to some sort of fear. But I hope that, and I'd like you to tell me in the comments, like which one of those 3 types of speech that I mentioned tonight or today. Actually, I'm recording this at night again because we had to not go live this time. But which one of those words, which one of those types of speech, gentle, straightforward, or effective, are you going to really try to focus on using? And when are you going to do it? Right? Are you going to wait till next week? Are you going to try something today? Are you going to call your mom tonight and talk to her using some of those tools, maybe in a different way than usual? And remember that the more you go through that, what are you experiencing in your relationship? Is there resent there? When you say there's a tough relationship, there's usually some resent in that relationship. Okay. How many years have you been experiencing that and sitting in that and allowing that to live inside you? Right? Your freedom, your wellness, your happiness, all of the potential that you have really is on the other side of essentially just one courageous and gentle conversation. So think of it like that. Yes, it takes courage. You might be afraid to do it. That's what courage is doing something that you're afraid to do, even though you're afraid to do it. That's courage. So have a courageous conversation and bring those 3 concepts into that conversation. And gentleness is an easy one to remember, and it is so incredibly powerful. So experiment with it. If you don't believe me, try it. Okay, I'm going to have this conversation. I'm going to be courageous, and I'm going to use gentleness in this conversation. That's my goal, 100% my goal, even if the words don't come out right. And see what happens. And I would love you to come back here to this episode and comment and let us know what happened when you changed that tone of voice and your words to be gentle. And what happened when you were courageous enough to have that conversation that you have not been having. I really want to hear from you. And I pray that Allah makes it beneficial for you and strengthens the relationships in your life and frees you up so that you can really be the best version of yourself. So now don't forget that on February 7th, which is this weekend, that we're having an amazing intensive where we are going to be redesigning, inshallah, your life by redesigning the way that you show up to your relationships. And remember, in 80% of the cases, that means that the other people in your life are also going to improve by default. How amazing is that? Okay, come and try it and see for yourself. I'm putting everything that I have left into this room because I know how much it matters. I want Muslim women and Muslim men to be strong. I want us to be partners. I want us to be united. And I want our ummah to be powerful. Now the seats are almost gone, but there's still some available. And I don't want you to let another year pass being the strong woman who's actually dying inside. Become instead the vibrant woman who is actually free. Imagine how you'd move through the world when you put these tools into action and you're flourishing in your relationships, thriving in your relationships, and you know actually what to do when things don't go the way that you want, right? Or when you make a mistake and you don't show up the way you wanted to. And you know how to identify the difference between a, healthy relationship that's not perfect and one that is, beyond that. That's an unhealthy relationship that you need to, seek other types of help in. Because also sometimes people are remaining, when we think like we have to bear all this stuff and that bearing it and keeping it all bottled up inside is somehow patience. Sometimes people are enduring actually abuse and they're not fixing it and they're not changing and they're not leaving or whatever they have to do to get out of that situation. And that is not warranted. So let me know your takeaways from this conversation. Let me know what you're getting from this episode, what you're walking away with. And if you implement any of the things that we talked about in this episode, I'd love to know like what happened when you tried to have that conversation. How did it go? And if you implement this for a long period of time, come back to the episode again and let me know, have the people in your life begin to change, right? Even though you didn't do any, like they didn't do anything. They didn't listen to this episode. Maybe they haven't gone to therapy or anything, but they started changing because you changed. I would love to hear that feedback. So may Allah make it beneficial. May Allah bless you in your family and in all of your relationships. May Allah guide us all to gentle, open, straightforward, and beautiful, meaningful, deep communication with one another. May Allah strengthen our connection with each other and help us help each other towards Him in the best way possible. Ameen. I really do hope to see you guys in the room on February 7th, inshallah. You should be able to find the link somewhere around this video. And that's it. So signing off. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.